when I got to the campsite, I went about gathering wood for the fire for that night and still a little unnerved. When I started making the fire and when it started to burn down, it was so strange because in the embers of that fire, there was a very distinct face that emerged, like just in one of the embers. It just felt like there was such a presence behind this face. And it was just so well defined and like focused and looking right at me from the fire. I just felt just such an overwhelming presence at that time. I knew enough at that time, and I was like, okay, I should introduce myself to the spirits of the land in the area. There was something very wild, and that it was sizing me up and just making sure that I was not a threat. It really depends on if you're intuitively aligned, whether you're going to really feel that. But yeah, it was a very strange encounter.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth Podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. So welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Lux Lingen, and let me tell you a little bit about Lux. He's the founder of the Society for Earth Grid Healing and a practitioner who helps people bring balance, clarity, and harmony back into their homes and land. He works with the natural energies of the earth to ease heaviness, calm unsettled places, and restore a sense of peace. Through his sessions, ceremonies, and training, Lux guides others to understand and connect with the living energy of the planet in a grounded and accessible way. Welcome to the podcast, Lux.
Thank you so much for having me here, Maureen. It's a wonderful thing to be here on your show.
I just saw that you posted our talk that was just done a few weeks ago, and I started listening, and I'm excited to listen to the rest. There's, I think, something really special when we come together with people that are like-minded, but we all have different perspectives and viewpoints, and it's just an exciting opportunity to share that together.
Yes, absolutely. As you're saying, it's wonderful to connect with other people on the earth healing journey. I find unfortunately, there's so few of us. And so when we can find someone who's doing the same work and especially who's tackling some of the same things, it's a wonderful experience to be able to share, swap stories, swap techniques, and see how we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. And I was really excited to see that you were on Tim Walter's podcast recently as well. And him and I have been on each other's podcasts. And that was just a wonderful discussion. I highly recommend everybody to watch that podcast. Tim Walter, who's a house healer. I'll put a link below to it. It was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, Tim is a great guy. I really enjoyed being on his show. We had a great conversation.
So let's get down into it, Lux. I would love to hear from you about the land that raised you as a child.
That raised me. Well, I grew up in Oshawa, Ontario, just on the east side of it. So Oshawa is a very industrial town, but I was right on the border there. And so I was raised alongside lots of farmland, and the place that I grew up, it had a nice big forest in the background. It was perfect for me as a small kid because there was a couple of acres, and it was really my haven when I was growing up. Like I would be out there every day playing with sticks, that kind of thing that small boys do. And it was really wonderful. I actually found that on that property was some of my first intuitive experiences because there was this one area that whenever I went through it, I felt like I was being watched. Like I felt a presence there. And actually the mental image that came to me when I was walking through this area was alien grays, like little gray alien type things. And it freaked me out when I was a kid, because I'd run through that area when I'd go through. And I've now come to see it as, as picking up on a presence. And I don't think it was negative. I think it was just, there's something there. And maybe something that was neutral in that it didn't mean me any harm, but it probably was curious about who I was and what I was doing. And so and even the sense that it was a gray alien type figure, I found in many many different areas that land spirits can come across seeming a little alien, little blue figures and that type of thing it can be very varied based on what mediums and other intuitives pick up. And I feel like this was my mind picking up that something was there and trying to put a face to it. And so I was already creeped out by it. And so therefore it put the only other creepy image that I knew as a small child, which was, watching the X-Files and then seeing gray aliens. And so that was one of my first repeated experiences with the land and with feeling presences. And yeah, I moved away from there when I was in my late teens, but it was a wonderful place to connect with nature. Absolutely.
Wow. So have you been back to that area as an adult? Just curious.
Not that particular property. No, no. Unfortunately, that area has really become developed over the last while. All the farmland that was around the home has been turned into subdivisions. So it's been changed considerably since then.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I was just getting a notion that maybe dowsing remotely that area and see if what you pick up, that could be interesting. But if it's someone else's property, I don't know about the ethics of that.
Yes.
But
Unfortunately, the new homeowner as well cut down a lot of the trees and a lot of the natural area around there, put up their swimming pools with cabanas and everything. And so it's definitely a different energy and vibe there now with the new owner.
yeah. Wow, wow. I love that concept of feeling watched as a child because I can resonate with that. I definitely had not actually in, immersed in nature, but like going down streets or being in a certain place and feeling like I was being watched when I was a child and not really understanding that. Yeah, not really getting what that feeling was. And I guess I'm not even realizing it. I'm only realizing it now that you bring it up that I had that experience. So very interesting.
It comes across for so many mediums as well, in that even when you're a kid, even your spiritual team, your guides and such, will tend to creep you out if they show up in your room at 3 a.m. or because you just don't have any context, right? You have no way of piecing it together and so it's just something very odd and foreign to your experience. So absolutely, sometimes the things that were frightening to us or that were creeping us out as children can actually be just the other side reaching out and we just weren't ready yet, right? And unfortunately, this leads a lot of people to shut down that connection. You find that many mediums, they go through a period where they're very open when they're a child. They're picking up on emotions or they're picking up on these intuitive signals. And then they get to a point, usually around puberty, where they shut it down. They're like, no, I cannot handle this. And usually that leads them to have to open it up if they're ever going to open it up again, open it up in their 20s or later in life. And it can definitely, creep you out at first though. But yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience coming from a situation in my life where my father passed away when I was just about 11 and I was frightened that he would come and visit me because he actually came and visited my mother. And when I thought about that, I don't know why, but I got so afraid. I was like, "Don't show yourself physically. I can't handle it." And I know that as a child, I shut down. I really did shut down, and it took me until probably my late 30s to really recognize that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the nice thing is that I find the other side will not show you things that you can't handle. That's, they'll try once maybe. And then if you're like, no, I cannot deal with this, they'll tend to shut it down. I've seen that also in many mediums who were able to see full body apparitions and such when they were kids. And so they see it once or twice in their bedroom, usually. And it's like, I can't handle that. And your guides, they seem to have pretty good track of that. They know, okay, we'll send them intuitive signals maybe, but we don't show ourselves in that way anymore. So yeah, it's curious how it works out.
Yeah. Yeah. So your work with dowsing, I think it's fascinating how we all get to it through our own individual ways. And I'd love to understand how you came around to it and how old were you and what were the circumstances around it? Because I think you have quite a story, different for many of us.
Yes, well, it all started when I was 12 years old. I live in Canada, and I went on a trip to the UK with my family. And for a couple of those days, we went on this guided tour of the stone circles of England. And so we went to Avebury Henge and Stonehenge, Avebury Circle, and places like Glastonbury Tor, the Chalice Well. Really wonderful experience. And thankfully, we had a very metaphysical, new age kind of guide. In fact, the tour company was called Astral Travels. So that gives you a sense of the vibe. And so definitely they had the dowsing rods and they were getting everyone involved and going around, walking between the stones, sensing the energies, seeing the energies shift. My father, he's a very agnostic guy. And even he, was holding the dowsing rods, walking between the two big stones at Avebury. And even he was like, "Okay, I felt them turn in my hands." Like that was something for sure. Very, very agnostic kind of guy, but he's still open-minded when the evidence is there. And he was all for it. He saw that something was happening there. So as a 12-year-old kid, I go through that experience and just become fascinated by all the energies and the ancient wisdom at these places. So when I got back to Canada, I became the weird kid that is hanging out at the metaphysical section of the bookstore, and I started going to metaphysical bookstores as well and taking workshops and such. And that led me to start to get into things like druidry and Celtic shamanism, especially because of the connection I felt with the stone circles.
Mm.
Found some good online organizations that were offering training in that form of shamanism. And that was pretty much my teenage years, kind of exploring that earth-based spirituality, exploring those older ancient traditions and wisdom. And then things kind of shut down in my late teens. I went off to university and became a little more interested in other things than my spiritual practices. But I eventually came back to it in my mid 20s, and I was getting tired of my corporate job in Toronto. And I was like, okay, I need a change. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to move into cottage country and just become a hermit and focus on my spiritual work.
Wow.
That's what I did. And it was about 15 years ago now, and just been going at it ever since, working with core shamanism actually a lot of the time. So I shifted from kind of the Celtic shamanism to core shamanism, and getting back to working with the earth and really working with earth energies. It's funny, when I was 13, I started a this really dates me. It was a Yahoo group. Yahoo Groups was this online discussion forum type service that Yahoo offered. And I started one called Earth Spirit, and it was for discussing all forms of earth spiritualities. That was 25 years ago now, and the forum isn't around anymore. But now it feels like I'm back at my roots when I came back out here and started practicing with the earth again, because that was always my focus. That earth centered spirituality. And so it's been a long period of just diving into what works. Focusing on techniques that get results, and really working with techniques from a lot of different traditions and kind of bringing them together in a package that is effective. And I found that when I was getting back into dowsing, I find that the rods, they sometimes work for me, sometimes don't. They can be a little finicky. But what really got me back into dowsing was finding body dowsing, that I could use my body as the dowsing rod, because often we're taking these intuitive signals that our subconscious mind knows, and it's being expressed to us through the dowsing rod or the pendulum, through all these ideomotor movements and such. And that can come through as well when we are dowsing with the body, because it's already coming through the body when we're dowsing with rods or pendulum. And so I found that just, dowsing with, a couple of fingers together was very effective for me, feeling the changes in muscle strength as I'm walking through the landscape or asking questions. That was really my way in back to dowsing. Yeah.
Oh, so it's kinesiology.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's really fascinating. So yeah, for those listeners who aren't really that familiar with dowsing, there's different tools we can use, as Lux said. We can use dowsing rods, pendulums, and there's all different variations of those. And we're literally walking consciously, asking a question, and these devices are moving. Yet, like you said, the energy is coming through the body. So you're using like muscle testing
Yeah.
to get your impression of this is where the energy is low or this is where the energy is really high. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I find it's really coming through the same channels. I mean, the way that I look at dowsing is that it is your subconscious mind that's connecting with these intuitive forces and intuitive data. And that your subconscious mind is being asked to communicate with you through these various means. And, so it can cause the pendulum to move in certain ways, right? It's not like you're moving the pendulum or you're moving the rods. It's that it is subconsciously moving. You're subconsciously moving it in a way unbeknownst to your conscious mind. And that is giving your conscious mind that data. And so, yeah, the body absolutely is responding to these same signals. And when you become aware of the body, it doesn't need to be communicated through the rods and pendulum. You can feel it right there. So I find it's just one other way of getting into it. It's not like one style of dowsing is better or worse. I mean, they're all amazing. The thing is, we all have different spiritual nervous systems, different ways that these intuitive signals come through to us. And so some people, they might prefer the rods. Other people might prefer, a Y rod or the birch or a switch or something like that. Others might prefer the pendulum. And, some might be more body-based kinesiology. So it really can depend, but it's all about the person finding what they really resonate with. That's the thing.
Really, truly fascinating how you got into this at such a young age. So your parents were obviously open to this sort of spirituality.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. My father, he's a bit more agnostic about it, but he's open to possibilities. My mother is actually in around 2000 became a Tibetan Buddhist, so very, very open to a lot of different systems and traditions. Absolutely.
What a gift. Really, what a gift.
Absolutely.
Really, so many of us, we're kind of like the black sheep of the family because it's like the rest of the family looks at us and goes, "Where did you come from?" But you actually had so much support for this direction of your life. That is really fabulous. And I hope more and more people have that opportunity. I am sure as consciousness is really expanding in this last several years, that this new generation is going to be so much more ahead of all of us, I think.
I certainly hope so. There definitely feels like there's a shift out there, and I see so many parents now raising their kids with an awareness of the unseen realms, and that I feel is really gonna pay off in a big way as a larger percentage of the population actually has sees these gifts and these connections as natural. That'd be a wonderful thing to see happen.
I would love to drill down to an actual experience that you had in the UK or could be after where you really felt the presence of something there. Is there a particular place and moment where you really felt like there's something really here?
Yeah, well, one that comes to mind, and I actually recently posted about this on my social media for the first time. This occurred before I really got back into dowsing, and I was doing some work with the land, but not as intensively as what came later. I went on a solo hiking tour into a provincial park in this area, and I went to this really remote lake at the far north end of the park. And the interesting thing about this place is it's mainly canoeists who use this park, and so if there's no canoe routes to it or portages, it doesn't get a lot of traffic. So this lake that I hiked into was very isolated, and I was the only one there. There's 3 campsites on the lake, but I was the only one using it for that time. And about half an hour before I got to this lake, I felt the distinct feeling of being watched. Like, it was strong. Like, it felt like there was someone behind every tree. And as I got closer and closer, it definitely intensified. Interestingly, definitely wild spirits of the land. I'm curious, have you ever come across the work of David Paulides and Missing 411?
No.
So what David Paulides, he's a former police investigator down in the States, and he looks at a lot of missing persons reports in national parks. And so he used to do a lot with the Bigfoot and Sasquatch community, but he moved out to working with missing people. And so he looks at all these clusters in various national parks, and he floats the idea that could be portals and all these types of things. Well, what I found very curious is that after this experience that I had in this national park, I saw a post on David's X account, and he posted the about a missing persons report that occurred a number of years after my experience, a missing persons report where and it was located about 3 miles north of where I had had this experience, because this lake was right on the north end of the park, right on the boundary, where then it was, a lot of cottages up in the wilderness. And so in this account, this 3-year-old boy or 5-year-old boy had been at this fishing cabin with his family, and his grandfather was out at the shed with the boy, and suddenly the boy disappeared. Now he was found 3 days later alive and well with no memory of what had happened, but he was found literally a quarter of a mile from where he had been last seen, in an area that had been checked repeatedly by the search parties. And they had brought in everybody. They had brought in helicopters and everything. But he was found a quarter of a mile away from where he was last seen. So he was fine, no memory of what happened, but he was found 3 days later. And this is actually a repeating pattern that Paulides has found in his Missing 411 work, where people disappear. They might not have any memory or recollection of what happened. And then when they turn up, they are usually on a place in an area that was searched repeatedly already. So very mysterious things. And you can ask whether it's portals, you can ask whether it's wild spirits of the land that are being mischievous. There's many possibilities, but it was rather shocking to me when I saw that report happened about 3 miles north of this lake that had such a strange experience of this wild presence in the land. Yeah, it was very odd.
Wow. Wow. And I would wonder again what you would find if you did a little dowsing of that area.
Yes, yes, I have not been back to that lake since, but it would be certainly fascinating to do. I imagine there's a lot going on in that area.
Yeah, even remote dowsing could be fascinating.
It's funny, I do remote dowsing, but I never remember to do any of these interesting areas, like, from my childhood or from past experiences.
Yeah, and maybe there's a good reason why.
There,
Maybe you're not
sometimes
supposed to,
sometimes you
but
aren't supposed to know certain things, right?
right, right. It just right away, I'm like, "Oh, I've gotta learn more about that." Yeah, learn a little bit more about that. How fascinating. I know I've been to a site in Ireland called Newgrange. It's a Neolithic burial tomb, and was so fascinated that when I came back, I did some dowsing there while I was there because I brought my rods, and that was really fascinating. But when I came back, I did some dowsing and learned some interesting things remotely. So yeah, it just these sites have such potency, but when we come across them without any fanfare, without any knowledge of some kind of deeper spirit or portal or sacredness of an area, it can be very fascinating. Like, wow, there's so many more places. Now, I want to talk to you about your Society for Earth Grid Healing because I think it's really fascinating. I would love for you to share what that mission is and what you do and how you help people.
Absolutely. So the Society for Earth Grid Healing was created to essentially create nodes of a network of people around the world who are involved in healing the earth. And based on our previous conversation, the way that we view earth healing is very similar, in that I see it as really changing that connection, of healing that connection that we have with the land and with the earth. Ultimately the earth is pretty stable, right? The earth is always going to survive, even if it has survived mass extinctions, survived meteorites wiping out entire species and eras. It is very sturdy, and worst comes to worst, it is going to at least be inhabited by bacteria that will begin the evolutionary process once again. So the earth, she's doing fine, but it's us. I look at it like, yes, we are part of the earth. We are part of Gaia, and we are kind of like the hair of Gaia. We walk upon her surface, and we are part of her. And I feel like we have become very disconnected in recent history. We really don't feel or see that connection. And I feel like, the earth does care. We are her children after all, right? And she wants to see us thrive. She wants to see us do well. But it's really us hurting ourselves by being disconnected. And by bringing back that connection, by asserting and reconnecting with the earth, it really it really helps to heal us. And so the way I look at it, there's a lot of grid work that we do, working with the various energy grids, the Hartman grids and such, Curry line, and also more global grids like the Becker-Hagens planetary grid and such. And the way I see healing of grids occurring is really that there are imbalances that are predominantly caused by humanity, by things like power lines and EMF radiation and such affecting these natural subtle energy lines. And so it's kind of reversing the effect that humanity has had on the earth grid, right? Especially human emotions. Human emotional energies can really run haywire with subtle energies of the grid. So really healing these human caused issues in order to help the earth function better. But in helping the earth function better, it's really helping us function better. Because I look at these energy lines as really helping to support us. In Eastern medicine, there's the idea of prana, that when we're breathing, we're not just breathing oxygen and air, we're also intaking this subtle energy, this prana. I look at the earth grid and these energy lines as something very similar, that they are a life support system. They're helping us sustain ourselves, giving us life force. It's almost like a mother's milk, right? That's coming from the mother. And so we are really helping to heal these lines of subtle energy so that they can better support life on the surface of the earth. So that's how in a nutshell, that's how I look at earth healing. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So you train people how to use different techniques to discover the earth energy lines, and you focus on the lines, I guess, that need healing.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's one of these things where there's so many different types of lines, right? You have Hartman grid, Curry lines, Banker cubes, and then I'm sure if you wanted to go into even more detail, you'd discover even more types of lines. So they create this spider web crisscross. I mean, if you took any single plot of land and tried to map out every energy line that was on there, you would probably just have a solid black cube or square on your map afterwards, right? Because it's just there's so much energies going on. And so yes, I definitely focus on the things that are out of whack, right? The things where there is a problem, and then that can be addressed in so many different ways. I feel that we have really powerful abilities of interfacing with these lines of energy to work with them and moving them and healing them. And of course, then there's physical things that we can do with the land as well to really help them out. But yeah, and then I also focus on the positive, right? It's not all on just focusing on the negative where things are out of whack, but rather focusing also honing in on those places where the energies are very positive, and learning to connect and integrate that into your spiritual practice, and also being able to amplify anything positive like that to really benefit the surrounding land.
Yeah, this work is, I think, so important for our times because, like, if we think back to, I don't know, maybe it was the 60s, actually, eco psychology came around. I think it was like in the 50s or 60s. There was a book called Voice of the Earth that I read that really connected me with how we are, like how we became so disconnected from this earth. And I think the practice of dowsing is just such a wonderful, just one of many different ways to help us really kind of connect into the energy of the earth. And what I love to tell people is that it can be so simple, right? It doesn't have to be a complex series of techniques that you have to, spend years to learn and practice before you get it right. How do you think about that? What would you say if somebody approached you and asked, like, "Oh, do I have to apprentice for years to learn this?"
No, I think it's a very simple technique. And the irony of it is that a lot of people have really good results up front, and then their ego, their mind gets into it, and they start feeling a little skeptical of the experience. And it's like, wait a minute, is this too easy? Am I moving these rods? And unfortunately, then that's where the difficulties arise, because suddenly you need to get yourself out of the way. And so often I find there is this beginner's luck period where it's new, it's fresh, and you don't have this mental overlay set up where you're questioning it. And then and then unfortunately there can be a period where you're getting in your own way, you're being hyper skeptical and trying to justify the practice to yourself. And then when you overcome that, then you're back to the easy street, right? I find one of the ways to get around that is just to make a deal with your ego. And I find this works in so many different spiritual practices as well, whether it's shamanic journeying or just any intuitive experience. And that is you make a deal with your ego. Your ego, it's trying to keep you safe. It really is your friend. It's just sometimes it does things that will annoy the heck out of you, because it's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep you not too weird too, because it's looking at it like it's remembering when we were small tribes of people, and it's saying, if you become too weird, you're going to get cast out of the tribe and you're going to starve to death off in the wilderness. So your ego is your friend, but it's often misfiring in modern life because it doesn't realize that times have changed and that these ideas are, more common, and you can find your tribe online of people who get this stuff, right? So it's trying to keep you safe. So you kind of have to bargain with it. You say, okay, look, my ego, you're going to let me have this experience and just shut off for the time being. Like, just go over there, sit down quietly. And when I'm done this experience, you can analyze it all you want. You can try to figure out whether that was me or whether that was subconscious mind or what was happening and whether it was your imagination. Go to town, okay? But give me this space to have this experience unmediated. And so ultimately you're making a deal that you treat these spiritual experiences as a dream. That when we're dreaming, we we are not analyzing what does this symbol mean or what does that mean, right? We do that when we wake up, but we are allowed to just experience during the actual dream state. And so this is the deal that you make with your ego where you say, okay, look, it's going to be like a dream. I'm going to go douse and I'm going to let these signals come through. I'm going to have the experience, and you can dissect it all you want after, but just give me that time. And I find what can happen because of that is that a lot of good data starts flowing through because you have that intuitive connection. You use this, the rods or the pendulum starts to give you a really good experience. And you have enough of that, and the ego starts seeing that and saying, in its little deliberations afterwards, it starts saying, maybe there is something to this. And so that can cause this upward spiral of trust in the practice. The key is to turn off that skeptical mind, that ego during the actual experience. Allow yourself to bring that data in, because when you get good data, that's what's going to build trust in the experience. So that's my little hack there.
Wow, Lux, that was really magnificent. I mean, treating it like a dream experience really resonates with me because I'm a big dreamer.
Right.
So I bring dreams into it is one of the main branches of my spiritual practice. But when you were saying that, I got a ring in my left ear, very strong ring, and it was like truth. That reminds me of this is truth, right? It's the intuitive side. So really, really powerful. And also, I just want to say to all the listeners out there, what Lux just said is not just about dowsing. It's about any experience that is other, that is with unseen energies, with messages, with your imagination, quote unquote, anything that you're receiving, images, symbols, sounds, feelings, gut instincts, all of this is in this same kind of bucket as dowsing, I would say. And, it's just dowsing is a practice of picking up using this tool, but we're picking up this all the time, especially in nature, when we're taking walks in nature. And this is what this podcast is all about. It's being open to that, not allowing our logical brain to start picking apart the experience while we're having it. It's just amazing. It's just amazing how we have to rationalize these experiences.
Yeah, that's the thing, the rationalization. I think it's a big part of it comes from our culture, of course, the scientific method and such. And, to rationalize this process or to justify to your ego that it should step aside and the skeptical mind should step aside. One way to do it is to fall back on the scientific method. Look, ego, you're messing up my collection of data. You're messing up the actual experiment, right? I mean, the scientist isn't running the experiment and questioning every single thing about the experiment while he's doing it. No, he gathers the data and then he goes and looks into it after he puts all the data together, does a statistical analysis and such. And so there you go. It is the scientific method for spiritual activity. You need that data gathering period. And you can't have the scientist that is in your brain messing with the subjective experience that is actually the data. So it has to step aside. So maybe that's a way for the left brain folks like myself to justify this experience and then having the ego step aside.
Yeah. Oh, very well put. So as we wrap up our conversation today, are there any last thoughts you would like to share?
Oh, just get out there and do something. I find this is the biggest thing I see on the spiritual path is that you can get addicted to buying books and reading and watching videos and just learning and learning and learning. And there's nothing wrong with learning about a path or learning about possibilities. But at some point, you have to get out there and do something and actually get into the practices and just experiment. If you're new to the path or if you haven't practiced much, try things out and you're going to be led to what really is right for you. It might be a process, but we can get into a situation of information paralysis when we want to understand every single thing about a practice before we get into it. And that's never good because you can spend years and become, an armchair metaphysician where you're just reading and you know a lot of stuff, but you know other people's experiences. You know how the world has changed itself to other people. And so to get out there and actually practice, you're going to find that you find your own understanding of reality and how all this fits together. And that deep personal knowing of these practices is a lot more valuable than anything you can get from books. That personal, individual knowledge and wisdom gained from the hard work it's priceless. So I would advise people to get started on that. Get out there and do something.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. Have your own experiences. And then there's no doubt when you have those experiences that this is real.
Absolutely. And one final thing, keep a list of all the weird stuff that happens in your life because if you're ever questioning you and saying, is this imaginary or not? Look at the list, look at how odd and unlikely, but also meaningful all these synchronicities and odd events and paranormal events and spiritual experiences are. And having a list like that can really help to open you up to more experiences, because it helps that skeptical mind to say, okay, there's something going on here for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, I thank you so much for being on here today, Lux. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure as well. I had a great time. You asked great questions. And yeah, if people are curious about what I do, they can visit my website at earthgridhealing.com. And I also am on Instagram. My handle there is earthgridhealing. And they can look me up on Facebook. I'm Lux Lingen, Lux and Lingen. And I think that's most of my social media.
Oh,
Yeah.
your podcast, The Earth
Yes.
Healers
Yes, that one.
podcast, Apple.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
on Spotify, everywhere else. Yeah, the Earth Healers podcast. And if you log on to that, you'll see that this morning I actually posted a wonderful full interview with our wonderful host here. So yes, definitely check that out too.
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you so much. All those links will be below in the show notes. And I just want to thank all of you for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, please write them. We will respond. And please share and like, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a very beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.